Right now, inside a climate-controlled reliquary in northern Italy, sealed in a blend of 99% argon and 1% oxygen, sits the most intensely analyzed object in human history. To the naked eye, the 14-foot linen cloth shows a faint sepia-toned imprint. It appears to be a man, about 5'11", with a beard and hair, his hands crossed over his waist. Over the last several decades, researchers across 102 separate scientific disciplines have subjected this fabric to more than 600,000 hours of laboratory analysis. But the data has created a strange contradiction. Rather than clarifying the cloth's origins, modern testing reveals physical and chemical properties that current models of textile history cannot easily explain. To understand the evidence, we have to look past the religious tradition and examine the cloth strictly as a piece of physical evidence recovered from the historical record. The first category of evidence is the staining. Chemical and immunological testing confirms the presence of actual human blood, specifically type AB, containing genetic markers consistent with populations in the 1st century Levant. This diagram maps the physical trauma visible on the body. There are over 300 distinct lacerations concentrated across the back and legs, with a shape and distribution that match the strike pattern of a Roman lead-tipped whip. At the scalp, researchers have identified roughly 50 puncture wounds, entirely encircling the head. This pattern matches the historical use of a crown of thorns, a detail specific to only a few recorded execution accounts. The arm wounds show a specific anatomical reality. While many historical artworks depict nails driven through the palms, this body shows the entry points at the wrists, the only part of the hand capable of supporting a human's weight during crucifixion. Microscopic analysis of the fibers reveals a critical sequence. The blood was deposited on the cloth first. It soaked through the linen through simple capillary action, leaving the fibers underneath the stains entirely clean. This means the faint image of the body was formed at a later point, creating a secondary imprint that appears to wrap around the pre-existing bloodstains without smearing or disturbing them. In 1898, the first photographs of the cloth revealed an unexpected characteristic. The faint sepia markings are actually a perfect photographic negative, showing far more detail in the reversed image than is visible to the naked eye. The 1978 STURP investigation sought to find the paint or dye responsible for the image, but chemical tests found no brushstrokes, no pigments, and no artistic medium binding the fibers together. Under extreme magnification, the image appears to be a result of rapid dehydration. This chemical change is limited strictly to the outermost 200 to 600 nanometers of the topmost linen fibers, a depth so shallow it doesn't even penetrate the thread. Using a NASA VP8 image analyzer, scientists discovered that the intensity of this dehydration correlates directly to physical proximity. The closer the body was to the cloth, the darker the discoloration, encoding three-dimensional distance information into a two-dimensional surface. Recent DNA analysis has added another layer of complexity. Biological material extracted from the image area shows highly unusual genetic sequences that mix archaic Middle Eastern markers with populations that were geographically distant in the ancient world. These specific traits, a photographic negative that encodes 3D spatial data through submicron dehydration, present a technical profile that has yet to be fully replicated by any known historical or modern method. However, in 1988, a prominent study seemed to settle the matter. Carbon-14 dating from 3 independent laboratories placed the age of the linen in a medieval window between 1260 and 1390 AD. But years later, when the raw data from that study was finally released, researchers noted a flaw. The sample had been cut from a corner of the cloth that was heavily handled and potentially contaminated over centuries of public display. Historical records indicate the cloth was caught in a severe church fire in 1532. Evidence from the 2002 restoration suggests the corner used for the 1988 test may have been a medieval repair, where younger cotton threads were rewoven into the original linen. To address this, scientists recently applied a different method, wide-angle X-ray scattering. This analyzes the structural degradation of the cellulose fibers in pristine sections of the cloth that were not part of the previous sample. The results of this X-ray analysis suggest that the structural aging of the main body of the linen is consistent with a fabric that is approximately 2,000 years old. These conflicting dates have led many in the scientific community to conclude that the 1988 sample was not representative of the entire cloth, necessitating a new look at its original source. If the cloth genuinely dates to the 1st century, we are left to explain the physical mechanism behind the image. If there are no chemicals or paints, how did the fibers dehydrate in such a precise pattern? While theories ranging from gas diffusion to chemical reactions have been proposed, some physicists argue that only a sudden, intense burst of radiation could create an image this superficial without soaking into the fabric. Researchers at the ENIA laboratories in Rome have calculated the energy required for this effect. They estimate a burst of roughly 34,000 billion watts of light energy would be needed to trigger the chemical change. Crucially, that energy would have to be released in a fraction of a billionth of a second. Anything slower would have generated enough heat to incinerate the lemon entirely. This radiation model is highly debated, but it remains a leading hypothesis because it accounts for the unique lack of penetration in the image, though it requires an event that is currently impossible to replicate. When the physical data from the cloth is compared to the historical record of 1st century Roman executions, a specific pattern begins to emerge. Although the Romans crucified thousands, a severe scourging, a crown of thorns, a side wound from a spear, and legs that remained unbroken is a unique cluster of physical details. This specific series of traumatic events is documented in only one prominent historical biography, the account of Jesus of Nazareth. Science can map the 3D encoding and identify the Middle Eastern DNA, but the mechanism that transferred the body's likeness onto the cloth, without paint or ink, remains an open question. Whether the Shroud of Turin is viewed as an unsolved mystery of physics or a physical record of a historical event, it remains a rare instance where the more we look, the more the object refuses to be easily explained.